Photographic composition is quite a challenge. It really is the most fundamental issue or fundamental first step towards creating great photography. And without a great composition, then you really can't possibly have a great photograph, no matter how great your focusing, or even how fantastic the lighting. Even superb lighting can't really save a very badly composed picture. And it really doesn't matter whether you're a whiz on Photoshop either. That's not going to save a bad composition. You can do a certain amount with Photoshop, of course, rearranging a few elements or a little bit of window dressing and so on, but it's not going to save a truly bad composition. So really underlying all good photography, of course, is the composition, getting that right at the beginning in camera, or even before you press the shutter, just in your mind, and lining up what you think is going to make a great picture. So going to move on into the talk, and at risk of being a little bit boring, I have a few bullet points to actually sort of just summarize some of the things that I consider when I'm looking at compositions, or looking at a landscape or some scene in which I'm trying to create a composition anyway. And hopefully this won't be too painful, it won't take too long. Basically, a few golden rules to creating great compositions. First, number one, king above all, is keep it simple. Less is more. That is, don't try and cram everything in. The more stuff you put in, the more clutter there is. And the more clutter there is, the less there is for the eye to look at. Ironically, the eye will skip around the scene, not really coming to rest on anything in particular in the frame, and won't really know what the picture is meant to be about. You need to have really simple composition with a single strong subject that dominates the frame. Doesn't necessarily fill the frame, although sometimes it does, but dominates the frame, and so that everything else in the picture, what's often called the negative space, that is everything that is not the subject, simply falls away from conscious view. Hang on just a moment. I think we've got, I thought we had someone waiting to join, but no, I don't think that there is. So negative space, it just falls away from conscious view. It doesn't compete at all for attention with the main subject, and the main subject really holds your attention. Now, next to that, then there's also, you can instill some diagonals and so on to help instill a sense of movement and energy, and the sense of 3 dimensions into your picture as well. Welcome to Camilla, who's just joined. Camilla is in the Philippines, I believe, so that's quite amazing. So it's 3 a.m. in the Philippines, so that's dedication to the cause, that is. Anyway, so we're looking at these golden rules. Keep it simple, because less is more. Have a single strong subject that dominates the frame. The negative space, that is everything that is not the main subject in the frame, should fall away from conscious vision. You should hardly notice that it's there. Doesn't compete with the main subject for your attention. And you can use some diagonals to actually instill a sense of movement in 3 dimensions. That's a little bit of a secondary point, really. And how to make that negative space fall away from conscious view, or at least not compete with the main subject for attention. Well, there are several ways. I've listed 3 here, and I think those are the 3 main ones I can think of. First of all, you can have a very plain, detail-free backdrop. So, for example, just very calm water, just a blank sky, or simple sand, something like this, or even just a plain wall behind you, behind the subject, I should say. And the other one, of course, is to have a background out of focus. If you have your main subject clearly in focus and everything else behind it completely blurred, then of course your main subject will really pop out of that background. And this, of course, is really important with portrait photography and wildlife photography, and that's the main areas of usage, but not entirely with those 2, but those are the main areas. And then, excuse me, in the sort of the real world, you might say, is rather unusual to actually have either of these first 2 points. More often, especially with landscape photography, we're struggling with quite a complex and quite often quite a cluttered scene, and we've got to try and make all that work together to actually help support the subject that you've picked on, and so the negative space works together towards help direct attention to the main subject. So that the diagonals I mentioned just now really come in. So you can have, for example, a road cutting diagonally across the scene and leading the eye from the front of the picture to the main subject somewhere in the frame, or perhaps a meandering stream or a tree trunk that's lying on the ground, or even just patterns in the sky, clouds in the sky. These can sometimes lead the eye down towards the main subject. And that's especially so, all these things over these diagonals actually are especially so if you're using a wide angle lens where you can exaggerate the effect of diagonals that might already be there, or even create a few diagonals that the naked eye can't see. So that's kind of the backdrop to what the way I think about trying to create great compositions. It's really just sort of the starting point. I'm just going to then go through a few examples of some of these, most especially the diagonals. But first of all, those pictures with plain backdrops. And this is obviously a really classic example of those plain backdrop kind of pictures. Here we just have a silhouette of a swan swimming across a very calm river. Really is only the swan, some ripples in the water, but they also just help to set the scene. So just this simple swan image with nothing else competing for attention, nothing else getting in the way, nothing else drawing the eye out of the frame or away to something else. So it's a simple, plain backdrop. And then a melting piece of ice. This is this is glacial ice melting off glaciers in Iceland. Just a small piece of ice melting in very calm water. I do tend to use water an awful lot in my pictures, so bear with me, but it's very calm water, got the piece of ice and its reflection. The ice itself is a fairly complicated shape, but there's absolutely nothing else in the scene competing with it for attention. It's quite obvious what the main subject is, and your eye just goes to that lump of ice. It does skip around a little bit within that lump of ice from the spike on the right to the lump in the middle and the main body of the ice towards the back there. But essentially that is the main subject. Nothing else is getting in the way of it. Okay, then sort of a nod to this relatively small amount of underwater photography I do. A sea whip, a kind of coral, growing on a sloping seagrass bed in the Caribbean. Very simple image, or a very simple composition, not really that easy to execute, I have to say, but a simple composition. Again, nothing else is competing. We just really have a very plain backdrop. The grass and the sand sort of helps to set the scene as a sloping seabed, sandy seabed, with just a single coral growing up out of the surface. This sea whip, which by the way is probably about 5 or 6 feet high, not so about 1.5 meters high, so it's quite a large thing. And it's in pretty shallow water. I was actually snorkeling when I took this shot. But anyway, just simple subject. And also, as you see, somewhat off-center as well, which is the usual way to do things. If you think about what people often think of as the rule of thirds, where you can divide your picture up into unequal thirds, and you have your main subject off-center in one of those thirds, just a little bit. So simple composition there, as always. And then coming back to Devon, and here we have just a very simple shot of 3 trees on a very cold, foggy day. Very simple color palettes, that's just white and gray, basically, on a very cold, snowy day. This was a couple of years ago. This is it taken at Powder Run for those that know Devon. And really just a skeletal tree against the fog. Again, a bit of water, I suppose, really, but fog anyway. So just helping to simplify the backdrop. No complexity, no detail at all in the backdrop other than those 2 supporting trees behind. And you can say here that we've got 3 subjects in some ways, but clearly one is completely dominant, and the other 2, those other 2 background trees simply support that main tree in the foreground and help, in some ways, help to sort of direct attention back to the tree. If your eye wanders off the main tree, then those 2 smaller ones will help to direct your eye back to it. Okay, and then out of focus backgrounds. This is a small pearl-bordered fritillary, a butterfly photographed actually on the cliffs above Kynance Cove in Cornwall. So again, very simple composition in terms of having the background completely blurred. Obviously, in terms of macro photography or close-up photography, your depth of field, that is the amount of pictures that's sharp, is very small, only a centimeter or so. And so everything behind the butterfly is going to be quite blurred. And so that's a very simple thing to achieve. Getting the focus right on the butterfly is the hard part. Clearly, again, though it does completely dominate the frame, there's nothing else really competing for attention. Perhaps the plant that the butterfly is sitting on to some extent distracts, but that actually really just becomes a part of the overall composition. Okay, and continuing with blurred backgrounds, just a single portrait of a man working at the Devon County Show. And I think that although the background is blurred, it's not so blurred you can't actually see what's going on in the background. And there you can see a rather large cow, I think it's probably a bull actually, so which really helps to set the scene. While the man we can see, I rather like this portrait, it breaks all the rules because obviously he is over to the right and he's looking out of the frame, which ought to break compositional rules really, but that's perhaps one reason why I like it, because it is a little bit rule breaking, but still for me it still works. Got a really nice face. I like the energy and the smile in his face, and the fact that the cow behind him helps to set the scene. But it's because it's blurred, it doesn't demand attention. It's not competing with the man for your attention. It just helps to sort of set the context of where he is and what this man is doing. He's obviously a steward at the county show. And then we move on into use of diagonals to actually help lead the eye towards the main subject. In the real world, where we really have an awful lot more sort of going on, we can't always blur the background or use a very simple backdrop. This image in some ways is a bit of a hybrid in the sense that we do have a very simple backdrop, just a blue sky and an aquamarine sea. But then we have this diagonal of the coconut tree's trunk leading the eye into the picture towards the center of attention, which is the tree's leaves, fronds at the end there. So I'm going to do something now which is kind of sacrilegious in some ways, which is to sort of dissect some of these pictures, starting with this one, and show you this. Really, hopefully, I'm hoping that this will show you where the diagonals sort of lead your eye into the frame. Obviously, the circle represents or shows you, I hope what you will agree is the main, sort of photograph's main subject, where your eye is directed towards the palm's fronds, and then the various diagonals, most especially the tree trunk or the palm's trunk, but also actually diagonals in the clouds in the sky will actually lead the eye down towards and up towards the center of the palm's fronds. I thought I'd put this in as well to give us a little bit of tropical sunshine.